Honestly, there was a time when I hated the idea of layering fragrances. Once through my journey, I was really obsessed with wearing Jo Malone fragrances, and that's where I first heard about layering fragrances. But again, I hated the idea of it, but the more and deeper I get into the fragrances, I like the idea of layering, and sometimes you need to layer fragrances because the fragrance is not performing, it needs to be boosted up, it needs to be enhanced, or you want some new creation made with two fragrances that are different but combine really well. So today I'm going to talk to you about how to layer your fragrances, and I also have 6 amazing layering combos of fragrances all coming right up. Thanks so much for tuning in. It's Sebastian. We're talking about layering fragrances. Do you guys layer fragrances? Do you enjoy the idea of layering fragrances? I most think it's like you're a mixologist rather than working with cocktails. You're working with perfumes. So kind of creating original creations with fragrances, or maybe boosting up some fragrances. So I've got a video also coming out soon on fragrance primers, enhancers, and boosters, and this is kind of going hand in hand. But this is more about layering fragrances and finding out about the best kind of fragrances to layer with other fragrances. First rule for me is I don't layer very intense, deep, heavy fragrances because they're so complex, they're going to overpower the other fragrance, and sometimes two very complex fragrances are going to be overwhelming and they're going to clash. They're not going to smell great together. So that's my first thought that comes to my mind. Are these fragrances going to layer well? Is this fragrance really worth layering? Because it's already pretty complex. It's got a lot going for it. It's dense, it's heavy, it's intense and overwhelming. Layering it with the other one, it might overpower the other one and you might not smell the other one, which could come off very light. That's not a rule, but generally those are my thoughts first. It can be done, but it requires a lot of work to do that with more denser, heavier fragrances. For me, some of the best layering combos I've accomplished are with some of the lighter, thinner fragrances, which actually need some intensification. So combining it with another fragrance enhances the fragrance, makes it a different fragrance, or just enhances the smell of the original fragrance and things like that. So there are no rules also. Do what you think, play around with them. It's a mixology thing, as I said. You're gonna make mistakes. Sometimes it's not gonna smell good, but then you'll find things along the way that might end up smelling great. And then, you come out with a brand spanking new kind of a fragrance that somebody says, oh wow, you smell great, what are you wearing? And you say, it's a layering duo, it's not really sold, you're going to need these 2 fragrances and things like that. Sometimes you can also do it with 3 fragrances, but in today's video I'm going to be talking about 2 fragrances rather than 3. 3 becomes a little complicated, and once you get the idea and the know-how how to layer 2 fragrances, then you can graduate to doing 3. But some of the fragrances that I'm going to talk to you about now, I would never even think about layering. Kerosene's Followed, that is such an overwhelming fragrance. Anything you put against it, Followed is going to overwhelm. It's not even worth bothering with the idea of layering that fragrance with anything. It is a massive fragrance, really overwhelming, very complex and very long lasting, so it's just going to dominate the other fragrance. Maison CRIVELLI's Patchouli Magnetic, it can be done, but once again it's also very very overwhelming. It's a room filler. I mean, there might be some things you can do with it, maybe intensify the patchouli in it because it's already pretty potent with the patchouli. It's also creamy and lactonic. Maybe you combine something creamy lactonic with it, maybe creamy sandalwood. But other than that, I think everything else is just going to be overwhelmed by the smell of Maison CRIVELLI's Patchouli Magnetic. Another fragrance, something like AMOUAGE's Silver Oud. Why bother? It's so complex, it's so overwhelming. In fact, I wouldn't even think about layering any of AMOUAGE's fragrances. Again, there's exceptions to the rule. There's probably fragrances out there that are fainter, lighter, you can do that with. But the majority of the fragrances, especially things like Interlude, all these fragrances, all of the extracts from AMOUAGE, they're so complex and very complex made. finding and layering something with it is just not going to, you know, work out. So these are just some examples of fragrances I would never think about layering. Again, ouds and things like that might not work, but sometimes there are ouds out there that are more simplistic. They're not necessarily very complex. It might be just a top and a heart and a base note, with the base note being oud, and then maybe rose in the heart, maybe something fresh up top. You can do the enhancing or layering with that. Maybe you want to amplify the rose in that fragrance. You know, layer it with something that's rose dominant, but also not very complex. So you have a nice relationship with the two fragrances, and they work really well together. So you can do it with more denser notes. It's just the more complex the fragrances, it's going to be more challenging to layer fragrances with. And going back to the Jo Malone, when I first started wearing Jo Malone, way back in the early part of 2000s, I liked the idea of layering Jo Malones. They're not very complex fragrances to begin with, and they can be layered together because they're eau de cologne, so they're lighter, plus they don't have a lot of notes and things happening throughout the journey of each fragrance. Makes it easy to layer those kind of fragrances versus go into the most complex fragrances. Now I'm going to show you how to layer fragrances. I've got 6 different layering combos, and I'm going to show you exactly how I layer the first and the second one. We're going to start off with OMANLUXURY's Royal Incense with Rose de Taif from Paris Monte Carlo. So OMANLUXURY's Royal Incense doesn't feature rose, but I get a rosiness from it. It's most likely coming from the geranium that's in here, but it's incense, honey, amber, leather, cedar, musk, and vetiver. And basically, I'm going to boost up the rose in Royal Incense with the rose in Rose de Taif from the Paris Monte Carlo brand. This is the extrait version. I haven't tested it out with the eau de parfum version of Rose de Taif, but for me the extrait works really great. It's concentrated, it's heavy, but it's also a bit simplistic, and it's mostly about the rose. So basically I'm adding it to OMANLUXURY's Royal Incense and boosting up the rose, and it's making it rosier but still smelling the incense and the honey. It's a really, really great layering combo. But Rose de Taif extrait features notes of Taif rose, Damask rose, rose, geranium, lemon, ambrarome, nutmeg, bergamot, elemi, cloves, musk, and Peru balsam. So it's a rose bomb. It has 3 different kinds of rose plus the geranium. So it's a given that these two will marry perfectly together. They'll be a perfect couple, and it'll smell really, really great. So for me, even though the Rose de Taif is an extrait de parfum concentration, OMANLUXURY is the more complex fragrance for me because it has the incense, the darker notes, the honey. It's thick, heavy, warm, spicy. So I would start off with layering the Royal Incense first. So what I would do, right now it's kind of up in the air because you haven't really done this. But what I've been doing is 4 sprays of Royal Incense and 4 sprays of the Taif Rose de Taif is what I should say. So basically, spritz 1, 2, 3, 4. Let it dry. I'm not going to let it dry right now because of time. We'll let that dry, then spritz on top of it the Rose de Taif. So basically, what's going to happen is it's going to be a blend of the Royal Incense with the honey and the rose. I'm sorry, there's no rose. It's geranium that's coming off rosy. So it's the honey and the incense with that geranium that creates the rosiness. And then basically the Rose de Taif is going to boost up the rose qualities in Royal Incense and make it a rosier fragrance. It might hint at something like AMOUAGE's Rose Incense, but that one doesn't have that sweet honey touch. This one does. And there is a sweet touch with Rose de Taif from Paris Monte Carlo. So it enhances the sweetness. It's not making it sugary sweet. It's actually toning down the honeyed effect. But all of it combined together, it's super, super amazing. Really, really, if you like the idea of a sweet, honeyed rose and incense, these two layers so wonderfully together. Really, really amazing. So it's Royal Incense from OMANLUXURY and Rose de Taif. Again, you'd have to play around. Maybe sometimes 4 of each might be too much. Maybe one is more complex than the other. In this case, I find the 2 to be very equal in the heft or the weight of each one. Sometimes the extrait de parfum is going to be a lot thicker, so you're going to want to spray a little less of the extrait de parfum, more of the eau de parfum. But in this case, I found the balance to be perfect with 4 sprays of each. So it's a pretty big cloud. And so you balance it out. But let the first one dry first and let it you know, dry, and then spritz the other one on top. And the reason I'm also doing the royal incense first, it's base heavy. So this will basically be your base. And then you're spraying the top notes on top with the Paris Monte Carlo. Even though each fragrance has its top, heart, and base notes, I'm considering the Oman Luxury Royal Incense the base of the fragrance, but it's got a lot, because it's got a lot more denser, heavier, and weightier notes, and the freshness of the rose is going on top. Because normally, typically, top and heart notes features rose, and you know, honey, incense, it's more of a base note. So the next layering duo I want to talk to you about is such a great combo as well. It's layering Mandarina Corsica by L'Artisan Parfumeur with Laboratorio Olfativo's Mandarino. So basically, I'm a big fan of Mandarina Corsica, but sometimes I feel like it's lacking a little bit of the Mandarin orange. So basically, what do I do with it? Amplify the Mandarin orange with Mandarino from Laboratorio Olfativo. So Laboratorio Olfativo's Mandarino is more of a eau de cologne, eau de toilette kind of style. They don't really put a concentration. They call it, I can't remember what they call it, but it's not necessarily... They're calling it parfum cologne. So what is exactly a parfum cologne? Cologne is one of the lightest concentration. Parfum is the heaviest concentration, so it's kind of in between. I would consider this more of an eau de toilette, with the Mandarina Corsica being an eau de parfum concentration. So basically, we have also more denser notes with the Mandarina Corsica. So basically, I'm layering down the Mandarina Corsica with spritz first, letting it dry, and then spritzing it on top with the Mandarino to give it more of a, you know, Mandarin orange edge to L'Artisan's Mandarina Corsica. This is a Quintambiche creation, and the L'Artisan Mandarina Corsica, and then the Mandarino from Laboratorio Olfativo is a Jean-Claude Elena creation. But Mandarina Corsica is Mandarin orange, caramel, Immortelle, Tonka, vanilla, bitter orange, cinnamon, sandalwood, orange blossom. So it's kind of a Tonka Mandarin orange gourmand, inspired by the island of Corsica, I suppose. But we're going to spritz that down first. 4 sprays once again. So Mandarina Corsica spritzed down first. That smells really, really great. But again, I think it does need to be boosted up with more Mandarin orange. And then on top of that, I'm spritzing 4 sprays of the Mandarino from Laboratorio Olfativo. You might increase it depending on how much Mandarin orange you want. But wow, the smell is really great. It makes for Mandarina Corsica to be juicier, more Mandarin orange forward, and then in the base you've got more of that kind of caramel, Immortelle, Tonka, vanilla, all that gourmand stuff under it. So this layering duo is amazing. I really, really love it. It's just, if you wanted more of that kind of zesty, sweet, tart Mandarin orange effect with Mandarina Corsica, it will do that with these 2 fragrances. It smells great, but there is that kind of caramel butteriness, sugary, vanillic touch under there. But the combo is really, really delicious. If you haven't tried this combo, I highly, highly recommend it. And again, the denser fragrance is the base. The heavier fragrance should be the base, because this is my rule. This is what I do. You don't have to do it that way. But I feel like if you layer the lighter scent first, the base heavy fragrance is going to dominate and kill, or, you know, wipe out what freshness the lighter fragrance has when you're first spritzing it, if that makes sense. Next up, we've got one that I'm not going to spritz. I'm going to tell you about it. The rest I'm going to just basically tell you about it. It's 2 from one house. Goldfield & Banks Sunset Hour with Pacific Rock Moss. These 2 really layer wonderfully together with the fruity, sparkling effervescence of Sunset Hour with desert peach, raspberry, jasmine, ginger, pink pepper, sandalwood, and benzoin, along with cashmere, mixed with the beachiness and the creamy, suntan, lotiony, beachy, aquatic, marine thing of Pacific Rock Moss with coastal moss, lemons, sage, geranium, and cedarwood. The combo is really, really great. You've got this fruity, beachy, sparkling, effervescent, creamy, marine, aquatic thing happening. The smell is really, really great. With this one, I would layer Pacific Rock Moss first, then sprinkle Sunset Hour on top of it. Even though Sunset Hour might be a bit more complex, it's lighter, it's more airy, it's effervescent, it's breezy. Pacific Rock Moss is more dense and weighty and more base heavy with cedar wood and things like that, the moss. So I would do it in that order. But let the let the Pacific Rock Moss dry down and then spritz on top Sunset Hour. You're going to have to play around with how many sprays of each. But with this one, I feel like you might do 4 of Pacific Rock Moss and 5 of Sunset Hour. This next layering duo I've mentioned over and over again. No, it's not the Nishane, and I don't have that one here today because I've mentioned that one way more than this particular layering duo. But it's 2 from one house, Acros Dark along with Awake. So basically, you're creating a mocha effect with these 2 fragrances. I've mentioned that acro fragrances are not necessarily very dense and heavy, so they layer really perfectly together. And Dark and Awake creates a kind of a spicy mocha cappuccino kind of a combo that's too delicious. The combo is really great. Both of them individually smell amazing, but the 2 together, again, it makes that kind of spicy mocha effect with cacao, dark chocolate, cinnamon, hazelnuts, vanilla, and then with the Awake you've got Balkans Santos coffee, green cardamom, Italian lemon, and Haitian vetiver. So with these 2, they're both about equal depending on which one, and I think I would do Dark first personally. It's a denser combo versus the Awake, but again, there's not really any rules. You're gonna have to play around with it and figure out which one works best. And also kind of equal sprays with this one because the concentration is the same. They're both from the same house and the fragrances wear pretty similarly. This next layering duo is a great layering duo of eccentric molecules, Molecule 1 plus Patchouli and fresh Cannabis Santal. For me, the reason I do this one is because Cannabis Santal has gone through reformulations. It's gotten lighter and it feels airier and not as dense. So basically, what I'm doing is adding the ISOE Super, which is a cedar sandalwood combo note, synthetic note, along with the patchouli that's in here, and basically it intensifies the Cannabis Santal. In this case, I'm treating the Molecule 1 plus Patchouli as the base note because it's basically woods. Both notes, the ISOE Super, which is sandalwood, cedar sandalwood, and then the patchouli are woody notes. So that's the base. Let it dry down and then spritz on top the Cannabis Santal, which is patchouli, dark chocolate, plums, vetiver, vanilla, cannabis, musk, bergamot, rose, and orange. For me, this layering duo is great. You're just basically enhancing Cannabis Santal with more of a patchouli woods base, and that's with Molecule 1 plus Patchouli. You can also do it with the original Molecule 1, and stay tuned for that other video on enhancers, primers, and boosters. That's coming very soon. But these 2 work really great together, and you can do a lot of great things with the eccentric molecules fragrances, and again, I'll mention those in the next video coming soon. And then one more layering duo I wanted to mention, 2 fragrances from the Dior Privé collection, layering Oud Ispahan from Dior with La Collée Noire, and this creation basically boosts up the rose in the Oud Ispahan, and it also kind of tones down its animalic qualities because La Collée Noire creates a bit of a watery, like a dewy kind of an effect in the Oud Ispahan. So a lot of people complain that these 2 are very light, they don't last a long time. This does intensify the fragrance as well, and it creates more of a less animalic take on the Oud Rose combo thing. And Oud Ispahan has been a very popular fragrance. It's Oud Rose, woods, smoke, resins, myrrh, floral notes. With La Collée Noire, it's rose, raspberry, peony, lily of the valley, blackcurrant, musk, oud, honey, sandalwood, lemon, peach. So they have complementing notes. It's given that these 2 are going to work perfectly together. You just tone down the animalic qualities of the oud that's in Oud Ispahan, and, you know, boost it up with more of a wet, dewy rose overdose with floral notes and you know, additional notes like that. So it enhances the fragrance, and also the notes are complementing. They're both from Dior, so you know the roses are not going to clash and things like that. So they definitely work great. And you know, you're either making the Oud Ispahan lighter, less animalic, or just intensifying La Collée Noire with a bit of more animalic edge. So you can look at it in a different way. And one more layering duo I want to let you know about. Dior Oud Ispahan once again with Diptyque's Oud Palau. Again, The complaint about Oud Ispahan is it's gotten really, really light. So basically what you would do is intensify Oud Ispahan with Oud Palau. For me, Oud Palau is not as rosy as Oud Ispahan, so basically also tones it down. It boosts it up. They're very similar smells to me, except that they're, you know, laid out differently with the notes. So less rose with Oud Ispahan, but you've got spices, incense, vanilla, and the rose as well with the oud. And then you just basically, you know, layer the two together and intensify Oud Ispahan, or maybe make the Oud Palau more rosy. So those are some great layering duos for you. Hopefully you guys get to try and take my advice. Last but not least, I wanted to kind of let you know about some combinations that I like as far as layering fragrances go. Vanilla and oranges work really, really great together. I find this to be a great combo, creating more of like a creamsicle-y kind of a thing. Sandalwood and orange is another great combo, especially when they're simplistic sandalwood fragrances. Patchouli and vanilla is a great combo. I would love to do something with a simplistic vanilla with Molecule 1 plus patchouli. I think that would be a great fragrance. Milky notes or a milky fragrance with sandalwood is another great combo. I would do these. Again, I would put the sandalwood in the base, milk on top, because sandalwood is a denser, more of a base note. Milk is more of a, you know, heart note. Vanilla and sandalwood would work great as well. For this one, both of them are base notes. You're going to have to figure out which goes first, which one is the heavier fragrance. Vetiver and citruses. Vetiver goes down first, and, you know, amplify the vetiver with some citrusy touches to give it a more of a fresher edge, and so on and so on. So these are some great layering combos that you can try, and hopefully you'll take my advice and, you know, come up with some great combinations. But let's go ahead and smell these spritz that I did. The Royal Incense with Paris Monte Carlo's Rose de Taif. Fantastic. Love it. Again, it does remind me a little bit of Incense Rose from AMOUAGE, but more of a honeyed take on it. But really wonderful offering. And then this one is also really, really great. The Mandarina Corsica is intensified with Mandarino, more of a Mandarin orange edge, with the fact that I layered those two fragrances. Really, really great. And those are the kind of things you can do. And again, I was not very big on layering. Now I am. If I want to kind of enhance the smells of some certain things, you know, make them different, or just boost up some fragrances. And that's all I have for you today on how to layer fragrances. Let me know your thoughts on layering fragrances. You might have your own ways of doing it. This is what I do. And let me know if you've tried these layering duos as well. And again, stay tuned soon for the primers, enhancers, boosters video that's coming up very soon. But if you have any questions or comments, please list below. Please like this video, please share it. Follow me on Instagram and Facebook, and I'll be back with more videos very soon. Have a good one. Goodbye.